Welcome to the Z Suite. I'm Mark Orttung. I'm CEO of Projectworks and really excited to have you here for today's conversation. With me is my colleague Jacob. He's going to be helping us keep to time, keep us honest on the conversation.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have our guest, Kyle James, here. He is General Manager of Groundline. And Groundline is a global engineering consultancy specializing in energy transmission and distribution. So, Kyle, we got to talk a little bit ahead of this, and I know you've done a ton of scary things along the way, but you described growing Groundline from about 7 people to about 90 people as one of the scariest. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting. It's scary because all of a sudden it involves a ton of people, right? And you've
Yeah.
and those people have mortgages, they've got families, they've got all that sort of stuff. So I think that's the scary part that I was leaning into. The growth comes with a whole lot of additional responsibility,
Mm.
um, which is a little bit scary. Definitely exciting as well. It is definitely a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I have
So
a,
yeah,
a friend who ran a startup that was raising money to fuel growth. He described it as the monkey on your back. It's just sort
yeah.
of always there. It's this weight you carry around. And yeah.
Because it is a challenge, right? As you grow, you're always looking ahead. You've got to make sure there's enough business and enough backload to feed the machine that you're at the front of. So yeah, a little bit scary.
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn more. It feels like the weight of that responsibility would force you to develop some tactics to figure out how to handle it. I mean, you've been doing this for a little while now, Kyle. You and Mark both, in fact. We're gonna dive in at this point and put you both in the hot seat on some prickly questions. As you can see from the sentiment in our chat, growth is not always comfortable. In fact, it's not often comfortable. Is the feeling I'm getting. So we're gonna lean into that. Audience, if you've got questions as we go through, pop those in the chat, and later on we'll take you off mute, and you can ask Mark and Kyle yourselves. After we've got through this deep dive of Q&A, Mark and Kyle will be workshopping a live problem from one of our audience members, which is exciting. So Mark, let's start with you. You grew a consulting firm from 200 people to 1,200. No mean feat. You must have got something wrong. What was your biggest screw up, and what did
Mm.
it teach you?
Yeah. I got a lot of things wrong. So I actually have to think about which one to highlight. I think one, I didn't really understand I was doing it wrong until after it happened, which was relatively early on. We had an engagement with 50 people. And at this point, we probably had 250 billable headcount in the whole company. And I got an email from the person running this 50-person engagement that it was going to be abruptly ending. Like we thought it was going to go another year, and the client fired us. And yeah, it was pretty terrifying. We had 50 people come back to our bench. It took me a while doing sort of the postmortems to figure out like how did we screw this up so badly that we just got fired. And it turned out sort of the quick version of it was that there was sort of us, a program management office, and the buyer in the company. And the program management office wasn't really doing their job and managing the program. We did not call it out. And then they kind of blamed us. It's sort of by not raising the issue, we became the owners of the issue, and then the
Mm.
business people came looking for accountability, and we ended up being the accountability. So learned a lot about communication and raising hard issues with clients, even if it
Mm.
might be uncomfortable with some of the people on their side. But yeah, that it really started a very challenging period for us at Nexient where our bench had way too many people on it, and it took a very long time to work our way out of that problem. So I think I carry that with me everywhere I go.
Sounds very similar to what you were just describing, Kyle, the weight of people with mortgages and families and responsibilities of their own. Similar question for you, Kyle, but slightly differently. So you have 12x Groundline through pure organic growth over quite a few years now. How do you not burn out through that and that weight, that thing that you talked about? Like, how do you not get cooked yourself? I think, and I'm thinking about my colleagues as well, across
across our business. I think mostly because we don't take ourselves too seriously. We do, but we don't. Like you've got to stand back sometimes and have a bit of a laugh, um, and go, yeah, we probably didn't do that the right way, um, and just move on.
Mm,
Um, and and I think having a good culture within the business really leans into that as well. Uh, there's a lot of laughing. Sometimes it's
mm,
very distracting, the laughter in the business, um, but it's a good thing. It's a stress relief. So
mm.
I mean, I don't take myself very seriously at all, to be fair.
It's funny, you often hear that from leaders in successful positions. The attitude or the way they see themselves is very different to how the outside world sees them when they're looking in. Mark and Kyle, a few questions
Yeah.
for both of you here. So when you look back at your respective growth journeys, what's the one thing that's unlocked the most growth? That one key where you've seen that repeatable thing that's made the difference for us.
Yeah, I can dive in on that one.
Mm.
For me, it was really clarity of why we were there and like what is it that we really do. When I joined, next thing that we did a little bit of everything. If you had a hard problem, we would do our best to solve it. And we moved towards really saying we're going to just focus on building great user experiences and it's going to be custom software development. We sort of boiled it all down to life's too short for crappy software. And it became a rallying cry as well as a filter. It allowed us to say no to a lot of projects, which is really pretty scary when you first start doing it. But
Mm,
then it also started bringing work to us because people knew us as like, this is what they do. They're really
mm.
good at it. And it ended up driving 5 years of fantastic growth for us.
What about you,
Yeah,
Kyle?
I can lean into that a little bit, because we're the same. We kind of um, stuck to our knitting, so to speak, um, and worked with the in the areas that we knew well. But I think as a business, the thing that drove the most growth actually was probably a very strategic and very good hire. My colleague in the UK, Adam, when we took him on, the UK exploded pretty much.
Mm.
So that was a really big breaking point for us. And I think we realized then, well, actually, we can, we've got the capability of actually going into other markets now because this is really working. So
Mm.
I think, yeah,
Right.
in hindsight, that's one of our biggest growth moments, I think.
Shout out to Adam. Pity he's not here, but I imagine it's probably if he's still in the UK, about what, 2 a.m.,
I
1 a.m. right
think
now, fast
I
asleep, I
think he's
hope.
on holiday in Spain. So
There you go,
go
living
at
his best life.
him.
Dinner time in Spain.
Yeah. Siesta.
Now, opposite end of that question. We've just heard about the two keys that have unlocked the most growth. What has been the biggest growth killer that you met along the way?
Yeah.
I'll jump in if you like, Mark.
Yeah.
Um, and mine, from my perspective, is the inverse of that. Um, Wrong people in wrong positions, um, and not because they're bad people, just the wrong skill set, um, maybe the wrong leadership style in the wrong
Mm,
position, um, and the consequence of that was, almost a reduction in growth, or
mm,
definitely a slowing down of growth in a particular region. So,
interesting.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something very similar. And for us, it was when we were growing really quickly, we would hire a lot of people. Every once in a while, we'd notice we start a new client, new project, and no one on that project had worked for us a month earlier. And it was just this like, nobody knows what we stand for, nobody knows how we work. But we didn't want to make the hard choices of pulling people out of existing projects so that we could sort of mix the teams and put some new people on old projects and people had been with us a while on the new project. Um, but whenever we didn't do that hard decision making and we would start a new team of all new people, it would end poorly. It always ended
Mm.
some kind of mess. So yeah, so getting the right people and people that really know what you stand for and how you work is critical.
Yeah,
I'm suspecting that figuring out, like diagnosing that this is the right person for the right role or the right client or project, or the opposite, we've put the wrong person in the wrong moment is crucial to accelerating growth. Interesting, Kyle, you mentioned that not only is it stopped growth, it's actually done the opposite. It starts to slow you down actively. It's not that you're not
yeah. Well,
accelerating, you're slowing down.
and if you have, people in key positions, it starts to affect culture and all of that stuff. And that's the secret sauce, right? So
Mm.
it is quite, that is quite important.
Yeah, great comment from Candice as well. Sounds similar to what you described there, Mark. Institutional knowledge plays a really key part.
Yeah. And some
Give
of
the
it's pretty subtle, but it's so key. Like what
mm,
differentiates your firm, especially in a sort of smaller, we were a boutique firm. You've got to have a differentiator, and usually it's your people and the way you work and the way you approach
Yeah,
a problem.
I mean, consulting is relationships at the end of the day. So it shouldn't be surprising that it's people, but
Yeah.
perhaps easy to overlook at times. Keep
Yeah.
those
yeah,
comments coming, audience, and any questions for chuck those in, whether to just us as the panelists or to the whole group, and we'll pick those up later on. Now, in hindsight, with all that you've learned, both Mark, Kyle, before we jump into our workshop, what's something you'd change about decisions you made? What's the one call that you'd make differently with all that you've learned over the years?
Yeah, a tough one. I think I would try to get really clear on the differentiation much sooner. I think it took probably about 3 years for me in the CEO role to really get that dialed in crisply and like, who are we? Why are we here? What do we stand for? And
Mm,
it freed us up so much and it really got us moving. I wish I had figured out how to do that in the first 3 months or 6 months. It's
mm,
hard to do. It took us a long time and a lot of hard conversations. And I had a guy, Andy, on my team who just kept pushing me on, like, I don't think you've got it yet. So it was great, but I wish we could have done that much faster.
yeah,
everyone needs an Andy.
Yeah.
yeah. I think mine was, if I think back, it was learning to make the difficult calls earlier.
Mm,
Um, I have no problem making decisions, but if I look back, some of the more difficult decisions, I think I should have trusted my gut
mm.
possibly and acted on that instinct earlier,
Yeah,
um,
I think a few of us have
instead of
probably been
letting
in that.
things drag on.
Mm. I imagine a few of us have been in that position.
Yeah, and that's part of leadership growth as well, right?
Mm.
Learning about yourself and the decision making process that you go through.
Yeah, and bringing people around you that can call that stuff out and
Yeah,
knowing your bias, your strengths, but your gaps as well, and filling those with good people.
yeah, absolutely.
Nice one. All right, time to shift from our deep dive here into workshopping a live problem. And I'm really thrilled to have Charlotte Harris join us. Charlotte, I can see you in the list just in a moment. I'll bring you off mute. But Charlotte has shared a problem with us to workshop live. Uh, Charlotte, if you're up for it, I'll take you off mute now and you can share that with Mark and Kyle live. And you have 1 minute and then we'll dive in to solve it.
Hi there, Jacob, Mark, Kyle, and everyone.
Yeah.
So the problem I shared with Mark was that I'm in a general management role, a COO role of a consulting engineering firm, one that has grown moderately, sustainably over a period of 15 years. Probably hit about 90 people, same as you, Kyle, just before November 23 in New Zealand. And those of us in New Zealand know what happened November 23. We had an election. And whilst we had prepared for this, it was on the corporate risk register. We knew there may be some change in government direction. Actually, change in spending priority by this government have kind of massively impacted our business. So we went from 90 people down to about 50 today. So we took a lot of hard decisions. And I think now when I think about growth, I'm I'm afraid to do it. I don't want to be back in the same position of having to make those hard calls again. Yet, as a consulting firm and as one that wants to transition to more recurring revenue, product-based revenue, where you've got a software stream going, I I need to know how to manage this transition phase because I do need to get the revenue in through people, and we do need to grow a bit to do that. But I think I'm a little bit shy of taking those risks again and growing. So what do I do? Apart from get the government to spend some more money. And we have diversified, we did that diversification overseas. We've got a generally quite broad client base. But yeah, it's tricky now.
Well, first off, thank you for sharing the challenge with us. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I think I heard two challenges there. One is the change in the macro environment in 23 that led to like the government cutting spending and that ultimately driving you from 90 to 50 people. And then secondly, the challenge is sort of thinking about new revenue streams and software being a potential new revenue stream and a potential way to get back to growth. Yeah, so maybe I'll start by just saying, the story I shared earlier where that client just sort of surprised me with firing us and rolling off 50 people all at once. That was relatively early in the 7 years that I ran the company. And I don't think I ever really got around it. Like it was always in the back of my mind that you could come in any day and somebody might just email you and say, here's, this project is over, just because it happened and I had no expectation it was going to happen. So it's really, I guess I just empathize with sort of the fear of like if we grow, this is challenging stuff. Um, I guess I would say on the growth piece, a few things I learned in dealing with sort of that really challenging moment. One was just getting really dialed in on every expense we had, and I imagine you may have done this already, right? Sort of cash is king. You dial in on every expense you've got, and we hustled as much as we could to get more revenue in the door. So we were constantly just looking at that operating profit or operating loss, as was the case for us at that time, and trying to shrink it to get back to break even and get back to an operating profit without letting more people go, right? That was always the trade-off is you can let people go, but you don't want to, right? You got great talent and you don't really want to like lose them or lose your reputation as well for being a great employer. So we did a lot of work, literally down into the weeds every week, looking at what we were spending and where we might get new revenue. Um, the other thing we did is as we began to grow, it took 6 quarters of shrinking before we got to quarter 7 and we were flat, and then quarter 8 we started growing. So that's a pretty long time, like roughly 2 years that we had to make it through. We started growing by bringing in contractors, which in our world meant they would work on this project, but when the project ended, we had no guarantee to them that we would put them on our bench and keep paying them versus our full-time employees. So it was a way for us to mitigate the risk a bit. And as we grew, we would have a slightly smaller margin with contractors than if they were full-time employees. But for us, it gave us a lot of flexibility. And we ended up running even all the way up to 1,200 people. We ran about 15 to 20% of our workforce in this contractor mode. So it gave us just some wiggle room. And if things would downturn slightly, we would end up moving people around so that our full-time employees would take over roles that contractors had, and we would let the contractors go. Not fun, not something you want to do, but at least it helped us kind of manage the P&L and the cash flow and the operating profit. Maybe I'll turn it over to you, Kyle. I'm sure you've got similar experience. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Um, I've got a question actually, because I noticed, so you're an engineering consultancy, but you've moved away from your core business, your core skill set. to software, and maybe software was part of that core skill set, which is always risky. But also, from my experience, the products take a lot longer. The cycle's a lot longer before you see any return, which I think there's a bit of risk there as well. It's not the silver bullet that it may seem like.
How have you thought about it, Kyle? Because Groundline has had thought about diversification in general. As a consultancy operator in New Zealand and in multiple other markets, what's been your strategy that has seemed to scale pretty well here?
Yeah, and we're very niche. Like we operate in the energy sector, but then if you drill down further, we only operate in the transmission and a bit in the distribution sector. So
a much narrower addressable market, but you've gone more global with it, yeah?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we're a bit sport in the energy sector because it's just going crazy at the moment. So, but we've had the same thing. We've had ups and downs. It only takes legislation change in one state in Australia to affect us in that market quite heavily. But we've always had the mantra that we've got to retain our people, because to get the skill sets that we want later, if we let people go, will cost us an absolute fortune if we can find them, and we'll be vying for the same resource that everybody else is. So, as Mark said, watching the cash flow is key, and we've had to do that numerous occasions, just because things dip, and particularly across Australia and New Zealand, our pipeline, I guess, of work is quite peaky and trophy. So we're constantly aware of that, and at any given time, legislation might change, and we have to think outside the square. But part of that strategy too was entering other markets that we can leverage from, which has been important for us.
I imagine in that journey and I'm curious for your take on this as well, Mark, and that position of owning a very specific niche and building a brand and a reputation which is known as the best in your market at that specific thing. When moments turn, like it did in New Zealand in 23, and hopefully it's starting to swing back the other way in the coming months, but that could happen in any given market that you operate in. It must be tempting to look to another niche, to expand, to diversify in some way as a way of finding short-term revenue. How do you weigh up your options at that point? What's the right call? What's the wrong call as far as diversifying from your core?
Sorry, Mark, go for it.
No, well, I was just going to say, I think you got to look at the risk of it and the time frame of it. Like you were mentioning earlier, Kyle, right? That going into software often has a longer path until you're getting a return for the investment you're making. And so we would always try. We stuck to consulting. We never got into software product. But when we entered a new service area, we would try one team. We'd, fairly lean. We would use our practice leaders who were pretty talented at lots of different things as a way to get into that area and prove out, get a case study, get a successful client engagement, and then prove that we could expand it. And so that really helped us mitigate the risk because we could sort of take advantage of the skills inside the company, and our leadership could at least get that first engagement done. And then from there, we'd have some proof, and we could kind of go forward. But yeah, it's a timing and really understanding when am I going to get revenue and profitability. And in services, hopefully that's immediate. In software, in my experience, it's often years potentially until you can turn that into a profitable return. I don't know, Kyle, you've tried both, right? So what was your experience?
Yeah, so we've since broken. We had a products line as part of the business, which we've since broken out to stand on its own 2 feet. But that's been a very long life cycle
Mm.
to start getting some real runs on the board compared to the consulting, the services side. So yeah, you know, if you're going to diversify, I agree with Mark. There's a risk assessment that needs to be done, and you need to try it knowing that if it fails, it needs to fail quickly. So you don't live with a whole lot of pain for a long period of time.
So if you're in Charlotte's shoes, or others, many others, I'm sure, like her, particularly in New Zealand right now, but also internationally, what are the signals in your core, in the services line in particular, that would tell you or your leadership team that, hey, we can switch from growth shy to growth confidence here? There's something that we can look to start to invest in. We can invest in building our bench and hiring, whatever it might be, to start to grow revenue again. What are those early signals that give you confidence?
A good indicator, and it's not always a good one, but you know, what's happening in the recruitment space. You know, are people being tapped on the shoulder? You know, because I know pretty quickly if there's things starting to move that I'm not aware of, particularly in the Australian market, and there's a shortage of resource, obviously, then my team get tapped all the time. And I'll get recruiters ringing me up saying, oh, you know, we've got 10 people of your sector that, you know, so it's obviously not the most reliable indicator.
So external market factors can give you some sense. What about internally, Mark? Anything that you can see in the numbers?
Yeah, probably the number I would look at the most is a book to bill ratio. So you can take either a month or a quarter and look at the total contract value of what you sold, your bookings, versus the total dollars you've actually invoiced or accrued to invoice. And so if your bookings are more than what you build, you should be growing. And if they are, you know, so 1.2, 1.4 is a really, really healthy book to bill. If you're at 0.9 or zero point 0.8, you will probably be smaller in a quarter or two than you are now if that keeps happening. And so it's a really nice, just because sometimes we would think from our weighted pipe, from sort of the energy we were getting, that things were going well and we were growing. And then we would calculate the book to bill and see it at 0.95 and be like, like it feels good, but like the numbers are still saying we're not there yet, right? And it was just a good kind of reality check for us.
Powerful, honest take, hey. Take away the emotion of the situation and look at the reality. The numbers don't lie.
Numbers.
Yeah. Nice one. Well, we're going to transition from here into Q&A, but I'm really curious from the audience, for those of you that have been listening in to this, does it feel like we've solved this? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the chat. And if you're going to give a thumbs down, chuck a question in as well. It'd be really interesting to get your take on what more we need. Candice loves the book to bill ratio. That's awesome to hear. All right. Candice, actually, I'm going to stick with you. You shared with us a question ahead of time. I might pull you off mute if that's all right. And you can share this one about when growth is fast.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
How are you all? Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask about keeping financial visibility and resourcing in sync. So when the growth accelerates, budgets, project allocations, revenue forecasts, they don't always align. For example, new work might be won faster than the staff can be allocated or that we actually have on board, and budgets might lag behind actual delivery costs. So like it creates a blind spot in cash flow and forecasting, which makes decision making extremely difficult. And then another point tied to that is consistency. As your headcount grows, there's a risk of variation creeping in. Reporting isn't reliable. Delivery quality differs across the teams, and culture tends to get diluted. And using Mark's analogy earlier, where you've got new people on projects and they just don't know the gist of or the institutional knowledge. And it isn't just a finance issue. It's about making sure like these systems and processes and the people can all scale together so that the businesses don't outgrow their foundations. And how did you manage to keep it all in line? Because it feels like I'm herding a bunch of caffeine high squirrels.
That's a great visual. Yeah, I love this question. I think I was writing a blog for a while we called the consulting balance, and this was actually sort of the problem I was talking about, that in the 7 years I ran Nexian, I think there was, I don't know, maybe 5 days or 7 days where I actually had the right number of people, either for the growth we were experiencing or, not too many people on the bench. It's just really hard to get that balance as you go through growth and get the right people on the right jobs. Um, and it's part of how I wound up here at Projectworks. At Nexient, we built an internal tool that gave us visibility into our resourcing. And so I could see a few weeks out who was working on what our utilization might look like. But building a tool like that in-house is a bad idea for a lot of other reasons I can go into in detail if you want. But when I met Matt and Doug, two of the founders here at Projectworks, and saw the tool and the simplicity of getting this really powerful view of your resources, that was part of what got me to come here. Because you really do need great analytics. You need to have that information about what's going to happen in 1 week, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, based upon what you've sold, what you've committed, who you've hired, and then translating it. I used to spend a lot of time with my talent acquisition team, sort of trying to figure out, okay, if we're really going to grow by this much in the next quarter, especially when we got down the track and we were 700 people, 800 people, and you say, okay, we're going to grow 40%, you start talking about these really crazy numbers of people. Like, okay, we're going to go hire 125 people next quarter. So you really have to get dialed in on analytics and visibility to, is the work real? Is it really going to get started? And I had a great COO who was really good at sort of saying, okay, you're telling me it's going to start in 2 weeks, it's probably going to start in 4 weeks. And he would sort of help us manage that expectation as well. Yeah, but I would say great analytics and really good visibility is one key. Kyle, how about you? What would you add here?
If I think of our journey, I guess that visibility is key. And we went through several different software packages looking for that visibility, and some of them weren't scalable either. So we outgrew them, and we ended up where we are with with something that does what we want it to do. But we don't. It's interesting because our resourcing, because our workload is quite peaky and trophy, and we try to level that out as much as we can. We look typically 3 months out and go, what does that look like? Because we know past that it's a bit of a thumb suck, really. So for us, I guess that's an advantage because we're not looking too far ahead. And we ended up with Projectworks software, which has done us really well. But I think going back to the culture point, because that plays a big part into how much herding of cats you need to do. If everyone's on the same ship, all singing the same song, like a bunch of happy pirates, then that makes the leader's job so much easier.
I love the link from resourcing to culture in that, and just a healthy culture. And no, it's great. Like I can picture it, a healthy culture where people communicate proactively with each other and problems are solved collectively rather than pockets of information existing in different parts of a firm. I can see.
And I guess there's an ownership, there's an accountability piece below
Mm.
where you're sitting, Candice, and making others accountable for stuff to report good information up is also plays a key role in that.
Nice. I'm gonna jump to another question, and I'm excited to welcome Johan to the mic. We had your problem last time, Johan. Cool to see a question here. Your question around headcount growth and new managers and how you enable them. I'd love for you to share that with Kyle and Mark.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Thanks for
Johan.
watching today. Yeah, look, my question just comes from listening to this, story, Kyle and Mark, that you've both been on of growing from a smaller business to hundreds, thousands of staff. We've got a headcount of about 30, but experiencing some good growth in a particular division. And so, that means people that were doing the work need to step up. And so I guess I just wanted to hear more about in building such a large organisation. Presumably you had a lot of opportunity to recruit externally, but presumably you also had a lot of key people where you wanted them to stay in a really important role, but to kind of step up. And so I guess it's just, that old question of what sort of worked for you in trying to make people better managers along that way, because I've got a particular problem I'm dealing with at the moment. So yeah, can you hear what's worked?
We did a lot of things
Yeah.
on this front, and I have to say that this is so much more fun to work on than when you're shrinking or flat, because when you're growing, you can promote people. If they want to step up, you have room for them to do it. We did a combination of, we had real transparency about every role in the company. So if you were a senior developer and you wanted to be a manager, we write out what does that job look like, what are the skills you need to have, and so people could see it transparently and start working on it and do a learning plan against it. We had a head of HR who was really great at teaching, and so we had all these courses on things that ended up being, you don't think of them as sort of technical consulting, but we had one called Adult to Adult Conversations, and it was fascinating, just trying to get people to level set and treat each other like adults. And what we discovered was a lot of our clients were not good at adult to adult conversations. So the adult treats us like we're the children, which is, and it was fascinating because this guy was really good at sort of teaching you techniques, regardless of which side of the imbalance you're on. We're trying to get it back to be an adult to adult conversation. So things which I didn't think about early on would be important turned out to be really, really valuable to help people get into those management roles and those client-facing roles because managing a client is a whole nother level of complexity, right? Like you're not just managing people, but you're sort of trying to put your best foot forward, but also you have to bring up the difficult issues and sort of push them on things that are hard. So yes, we did a lot of different training and a lot of different, but a lot of it was soft skill. And that ended up being really valuable.
Yeah, and similar to us, we in the early days when we were quite small, we had a skills matrix, if you like. That was quite rudimentary. It was Excel based, but it pretty much mapped out everybody's capabilities and skills within the business at that stage. We outgrew that quite quickly, but we've done a lot of work, exactly as Mark pointed out, with a good HR person setting up links between the job descriptions right through our progression framework for people to progress throughout the business, and making that visible so people can see what they need to do to go from one position to another. But then internally, there's a lot of, we've just recently rolled out leadership training to the whole team. So not just for leaders, because there's a lot of stuff that's included in leadership around communication, conflict management, being able to have those difficult conversations, not only with your peers when giving them feedback, but with the client as well, because you can guarantee at some point you're going to have that difficult conversation with the client, and empowering them, giving them the skills to be confident to do that is, and they do kind of get branded as soft skills. I like to call them professional skills because they're not soft. They're actually key skills
Yeah, I like that.
For being successful in your career.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's I guess that's my advice. Try and set them up, arm them with as many tools to give them the
I love the
confidence.
I love the separation of leadership as a characteristic from a certain type of role. It does exactly the thing that you described, Mark, where you start treating your team and your peers as adults, and just empowers them to reciprocate that, I think, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That's about all the time that we have questions for. Mark, I'll pass it to you at this point to wrap things up. Perhaps a quick summary of the standout kind of key thing that you'd encourage everyone on this call to take away in action tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. Great conversation. There's just so many things in there that I really enjoyed hearing about. I think, for the sort of the core piece that we workshopped, I think just really diving into how can you keep the company going through the most challenging time, because there will be a point in time when things get better. And so how do you stretch that out and kind of just keep going is one of them. Two that I took away from it was really that sort of risk analysis and time to return, thinking that through so that as you look at new opportunities, how risky are they and how quickly will they pay back? And then I really like this concept that you call these skills professional skills, and that stands out for me as something that I'll take away from it. So, yeah, great conversation. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been good. I guess if I was going to leave a final statement, I guess for anybody, and this goes for any business, I think is but for me, from my perspective, the culture within the business is the magic stuff. So maintaining that culture and sticking to your values are key, and we try and do that as much as possible. And it's held us in good stead. And be intentional with the way you manage and sell if you're growing, how you sell that to the team, because you need to take them along on that ride with you. Otherwise, you'll be in the boat by yourself, paddling like a crazy person. So that change management and that selling internally is crucial. And thank you, Mark and Jacob. It's been good.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Our pleasure. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I hope you'll join us in 2 weeks. My guest will be BDNA COO, Karen Smith, and we're going to talk about change. And I think you'll really enjoy, I've gotten a chance to connect with her a bit. You're really going to enjoy her perspective on things. Until then, keep zigging and zagging, everyone, and we'll see you soon.